How's it going? Dave here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you my top 10 tips for beginner Neo Soul and R&B guitar players. So if you're new here, my channel is all about helping you make Neo Soul and R&B sounds on your guitar, and if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you're notified every single time I release a new video. So let's get into the tips. So tip number 1 is to learn all the notes on your fretboard. So what you want to do is be able to know that, for example, if I was to play this note here, you would know that's a B or that is an F. Okay, so a few simple tips for this. Learn up to the 12th fret where the double dots are, because once you've learned up to the 12th fret, then everything just repeats itself again. Prioritize the lower strings, so you can get away for a while with just learning the E, A, and maybe the D strings. Okay, so these lower strings are really important because normally when we're building chords, we build chords from these lowest notes, and knowing what these lowest notes are help you name the chord as well. And also, if I'm talking in a video and saying, oh, this chord is an A chord, you know, oh, A's over here, so I know the chord's going to be over here, rather than me having to tell you which frets to play. It just makes things a lot easier. So just to summarize, focus on the E, A, and maybe the D strings to start off with. Make sure they're fully learnt, and then move on to the higher strings. My second tip is to learn about intervals. So intervals are pretty much the building blocks of music. So what an interval actually is the measurement of the distance between two notes. So a small interval is going to be something like this, where the next note is only 1 fret apart, and then a bigger interval would be maybe there, really low note and a really high note. So those are intervals. All of the intervals have different names. There's not that many to remember, but it will take some memorization. But once you learn all these intervals, then it's going to unlock scales, it's going to unlock chords, it's going to make the connections a lot easier. You're going to be able to connect all the dots with music theory once you know intervals. Learning intervals is also going to help you target particular notes in solos and also play more interesting chords after you learn some basic ones. Now, if you want to learn these things, the notes on the fretboard, and you want to learn all about intervals, I've done a music theory guide for beginners, which you can check out. I'll link it in the description. I'll link it above my head here. So go and check that out afterwards. A quick note as well, make sure you're taking notes on this video because there are 10 tips here. And if you learn all these 10 things, it's really going to set you up. And you're going to be, after mastering all these 10 things, maybe in the kind of upper beginner, starting to get into intermediate level. So what I'm saying here is really important. So let's move on to tip 3. Tip 3 is to learn the major and minor bar chord shapes. So once you learn the major and minor shapes, major, minor, then you can play these shapes all across the fretboard. And once we combine this with tip number 1, so for example, let's say we want to play a G major chord, you know the major shape and you know where G is, and you've got a G major chord. Or I say play an F sharp minor, you know where F sharp is, and you know a minor shape, so you know that's an F sharp minor. So this stuff is really, really important to know. So learn your major and minor chord shape. Then if you're feeling confident with those, then move on to 7th chords. So you want to learn major 7th chords, you want to learn minor 7th chords, and you want to learn dominant 7th chords. These chords are a little bit more advanced, but they are going to make your music sound more sophisticated as well. So tip number 4 kind of builds on to tip number 3, and that's to learn the Nashville number system. So again, I've done another video explaining the Nashville number system in detail. What it does basically is takes the major scale. So the major scale is another thing you're going to have to learn, and it assigns a chord for each one of the notes in the major scale. So we've got the first note, chord number 1, second note, chord number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's only 7 numbers to learn, and which chords belong to which number. So chords 1, 4, and 5 are major, and chords 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and chord 7 is diminished. And basically I've just explained the Nashville number system for you there, but obviously you might be a little bit confused by that, so make sure you check out my video where I go into detail on it if you want to learn a bit more about the Nashville number system. Now the Nashville number system is again really important, as this is going to allow you to write chord progressions, so you know which 7 chords all work nicely together, and then you can pick and choose these chord progressions out of the 7 different chords that you have available. But then you're going to have to learn how to solo over these chord progressions, and this is where the next tip comes in. So tip number 5 is to learn the pentatonic scale. So the pentatonic scale is basically the same as the major scale, but we've condensed it down into 5 notes rather than 7 notes. These 5 notes are kind of like the most important notes to get really solid sounding melodies. And once you learn the pentatonic scale in one place, then you can move it up into other places of the fretboard. In total, there are 5 different shapes that you can learn. And it allows you to play the pentatonic scale all over the fretboard. So, for example, there you go, I just played kind of all over the fretboard just because I know these shapes so well. And it gives you a level of freedom on the fretboard that is really, really useful. And it's fun as well because you can do whatever you like wherever you want. Now that's one element of soloing, learning the scales and learning which notes work. But there's another element that's just as important, and that's your articulation and your dynamics. So basically we're going to wrap everything into how you play the notes that you're playing. So you could pick hard, you could pick light, you could slide into notes, you could use vibrato, you could tremolo pick, you could do trills. There's so many like that, grace notes. There's so many different ways to just play one note. This is what's so great about a guitar, is we've got so many expressions that we can do with it. Like a piano, you can't hammer on a note on a piano, you can't pull off a note on a piano, you can't bend a note on a piano. I'm really singling out pianos here, but lots of other instruments are not as versatile as the guitar in expressing yourself. You can really make the guitar sing. So that is something you need to work on as well. Again, I've done a video on articulation, so if you want to check that out, it will be in the description or in the comments. I'm sure you'll find it. But yeah, just to summarize, articulation is the thing that separates beginner guitarists from advanced players. So it's really, really worth getting good at it. Tip number 7 is to use a metronome. And this could actually be the most important lesson you learn from this video. Using a metronome has so many benefits to your playing. So first of all, it's going to improve your rhythm. It's also going to help you speed up your playing. So if there's a song where it's too fast for you, you just can't play it, you can really slow it down with the metronome and gradually increase the speed of the metronome until you get to the speed of the song that you're playing. And you won't notice these jumps in speed because they're so small, and in no time you'll be at the speed that you desire. Playing with a metronome also makes you a lot cleaner as a guitarist because it forces you to kind of slow down and play everything correctly before speeding up, which is a natural tendency of us guitarists. We tend to try and play everything at full speed or even faster than is necessary to start off with. So use a metronome. I can't stress it enough how important using a metronome is. If there's one thing that you take from this video, it's use a metronome. So tip number 8 is to practice and learn rhythms. So we've got a bar and that contains 4 beats. But there are also other ways we could subdivide this bar. We could divide it into 8th notes, so 8 different notes we could play in that bar, or we could divide it into 16. Or we could even use triplets. So 3 triplets would fit into 1 beat. Or you could even double that up and 6 triplets would fit into 1 beat. And you can get really advanced with it with quintuplets and septuplets, etc. Lots of things you can do, learn different rhythms, lots of variety, and that's going to make you a better player as well. Tip number 9 is ear training. This is going to really help you out in a lot of situations. So if you're learning a song and there's no guitar tabs for it maybe, then you can use your ear if you've trained it well enough to learn the song without a tab. That in itself is a good exercise for improving your ear training, just trying to learn something that you hear without a guitar tab. If you need to work out the key of a song, or if you need to kind of work out the chord progression of a song, your ear training is really important for being able to do that. And maybe you might have a cool melody in your head. If your ear training is good, you'll know exactly what to do on the fretboard to transcribe that melody from your brain onto your guitar. Whereas if your ear training is not very good, you're going to really find it to be quite difficult. This actually ties in with your knowledge of intervals and music theory that I spoke about at the beginning. If you can hear what you're playing in your head and know the intervals that you're playing, it's going to make everything so much quicker to transcribe onto the guitar. So all of these things are really linked together, and you'll start seeing the dots start connecting to each other once you start learning all of these different bits. My final tip for you is something that doesn't get recommended enough, and that is to record yourself. So you can use any method, whether that's recording with your phone, with your camera, or with just the microphone, or whether that's using some digital audio workstation software like GarageBand or Logic or Reaper or Pro Tools or something like that. It's super important because when you're playing and when you're in the moment, things feel good, they sound good, and when you listen back to yourself on a recording, you're going to realize that you weren't as good as you heard yourself to be when you were actually playing. So you're going to notice little inconsistencies in your rhythm, you're going to learn different little silly mistakes that you're making. It happens to me all the time, and that's after 16 years of playing guitar. So recording yourself is really, really, really important. Definitely makes you notice things that you wouldn't notice otherwise. So definitely do that. So to summarize, let's recap all of these tips. So tip number 1 is to learn all of the notes on the fretboard. Tip number 2 is to learn your intervals. Tip number 3 is to learn your major and minor chord shapes and maybe even extend those out to the 7th chord shapes. Tip number 4 is to learn the major scale and the Nashville number system that goes with the major scale. Tip number 5 is to learn the pentatonic scale in all 5 positions. That's going to help you solo. Tip number 6 is to work on your articulation and dynamics. So that's focusing more on how we play the notes rather than which notes we're playing. Tip number 7, and probably the most important tip here, is to use a metronome. Tip number 8 is to learn about rhythm and all the different types of rhythm we can use in music. Tip number 9 is to work on your ear training. And tip number 10 is to record yourself. If those tips were helpful for you and you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the like button and let me know what you thought in the comments. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. If you want some more beginner Neo Soul and R&B lessons, then make sure you check out this video here, as that's going to really help you out. The topics that I've talked about in this video, the ones I've done videos on, I'll link in the description and in the comments for you so that you can use those as further learning tools. So I'll see you there. Have a good one.